Genetic engineering, two simple words that stir up a multitude of complicated emotions in many people. While at first glance this new and arising technology seems to be just that, something that would lead to scientific and medical advances, the road to implementing it involves many more troublesome avenues. Genetic engineering is an artificial modification of an organism's genes. It can involve transferring existing genes from one organism to another, or introducing newly created cell combinations to an organism. These combinations are generally not found in nature, hence why they are man-made. While conventional breeding methods have long been used to produce more desirable traits in animals, genetic engineering is a much more targeted and powerful method of doing so. The thought behind engineering genetic makeup is that there lies a potential to cure disease and even prevent the cellular mutations in the first place that would lead to life-threatening illness. This idea is revolutionary. While it is not often that the coding for one's DNA goes wrong, when it does, the effects can be extremely damaging. Diseases such as muscular dystrophy, sickle cell anemia, and cancer can all be attributed to slight mutations or changes in an individual's DNA. To be able to reverse these mutations would mean seeing radical progression in the medical field. As Qi Deng, a professor of medicine and cell biology at Johns Hopkins University, acknowledges in his article, Role of Aerobic Glycolysis in Genetically Engineered Mouse Models of Cancer, genetically altered mouse models have shown us how tumor growth can occur in humans. Transgenic mice with medulloblastoma tumors in the brain were found to have faster proliferating cancerous cells when introduced to different glycolytic enzymes in the lab. This helps scientists suggest a similar relationship between aerobic glycolysis and cell growth in humans, and has the potential to lead to further groundbreaking discoveries. However, certain groups are only concerned with the possible implications associated with genetic engineering. The argument exists that if people can choose to make a healthy child, then they can also choose to design their child to be intelligent, athletically gifted, and even alter their physical appearance. Since natural selection and natural gene expression have always played this role, it is also possible that this could change the human race completely in the future. The introduction of modified organisms into the environment is another argument that exists against implementing this technology. Those against it argue that it will disrupt the delicate balance that exists in nature and that the homeostasis of different ecosystems would be thrown off by the addition of man-made genetics. One of the groups highly opposed to the idea is the Scientists for Global Responsibility. This group is focused on creating and retaining science technology that specifically addresses and supports global peace, social justice, and environmental sustainability. Their main exigency lies in the downfalls of what they see as imitated or cheap artificial life. As stated by Dr. Michael Rinesborough, a member of the SGR who holds his PhD in the history of science from Queen's University Belfast, in his featured article, Synthetic Life, Too Much, Too Soon, anything made in nature could, in theory, be manufactured cheaply in biochemical factories. Manufacturing life would throw off the stability of naturally occurring biological systems. While the SGR has made some valid statements regarding this up-and-coming technology, the group should work to promote genetic engineering rather than discourage it by properly educating the public, establishing some ground rules, and performing less invasive test trials. Educating the public on this new technology would be beneficial in creating a common platform that more people would find appealing. This would also create a more peaceful atmosphere surrounding the issue, something that would be consistent with the SGR's values. People have become so focused on the controversy associated with genetic engineering that they forget how important the main goal of the technology is to our society. If through education people could come to an agreement that this technology is needed, that the benefits outweigh the costs that may exist, and that it is conducted in a safe way, the technology would then begin to progress. Paul Arnold, a graduate from the University of London in biological sciences, acknowledges the benefits and drawbacks. In his popular article, Pros and Cons of Genetic Engineering, Arnold notes that the government will ultimately establish how the technology can be used, but how it progresses will be up to public decision. He believes that each of us should reach an understanding of what scientists are trying to accomplish, and that we all must be better informed to equip ourselves with more information and to know the difference between science fiction and science fact. By understanding that scientists will be helping those with inherent biological faults or whose bodies are deteriorating before their time, rather than constructing some sort of superhuman machine, the majority of people would be more supportive. The SGR's goal of promoting the responsible use of science could be further achieved by including information of this type on their website. Instead of placing such a stigma on genetic engineering and telling the readers to stray away from this developing technology, the SGR could responsibly inform those who access their newsletters and webpage. Although I am arguing for the use of genetic engineering by a group that is clearly opposed to the idea, I understand that certain rules concerning ethical and safety issues must be implemented. On the SGR's website, www.sgr.org, a section is actually included on ethical careers. Based on the fact that this group doesn't consider genetic engineering safe or ethical, they provide a list of alternative job opportunities that aim to steer people away from this technology. This is obviously very detrimental to this area of science. People who do not completely understand how genetic engineering works are automatically predisposed to come into disagreement with it. The SGR is discouraging individuals who may potentially be able to reach breakthroughs in this technology from even attempting to do so. Most of these ethical careers are environmentally friendly, involve research focusing on the downfalls with today's science, or strive away from the use of animals in scientific study. And while most of these careers appear to be extremely biased towards their stance on science, after reading through the group's constitution, their primary goal is to simply argue for proper analysis of benefits, risks, and uncertainties, as to not carry through with something we don't know a lot about. In the fall 2012 edition of the SGR's newsletter, Helena Paul and Ricarda Steinbrecher warn against the use of synthetic biology. They caution that scientists don't yet understand enough about gene functions and interactions to build new organisms from scratch, or even decide which genes to leave out of a minimal genome. They go on to say that it is useful for learning, but not ripe for release. It is clear that even this group recognizes the potential benefits genetic engineering has on increasing knowledge related to the medical field. So why can't the technology be used specifically and solely for learning until all of the risks are understood? The SGR could argue for certain uses of genetic engineering that they find questionable to be deemed illegal. Clearly, this technology should not be used to improve upon the human race. Playing God and choosing your child's hair, eye color, or level of intelligence should be ruled out altogether. This would eliminate the ethical controversy. Another ground rule that should be established is preventing the release of modified organisms into the environment. Direct modification of the environment itself should also be illegal to address and eradicate the safety concerns. The SGR, who is a group of scientists that clearly upholds a strong science background, could themselves develop and perform test trials that wouldn't result in a negative environmental impact. The SGR argues that genetic modification of crops has led to ineffective agricultural methods and a widespread loss of topsoil and water implications. As scientists, this group has a certain responsibility to make advancements, and from their perspective, they also have a responsibility to make advancements safely and effectively. This idea is not entirely impossible like the SGR seems to think. Since the technology is in the developing stages and has not yet been commercialized, it is true that there is difficulty in fully evaluating the risks that may be associated with the technology. By erring on the side of caution, the SGR has the right idea. However, they cannot completely avoid and rule out genetic engineering altogether. By performing their own controlled experiments in the lab and by restricting it to a closed environment, the impact on the world around us would be virtually nothing until scientists could better come to a complete understanding of the risks and benefits. The SGR's main concern when it comes to environmental impact is the release of genetically modified organisms into the environment, as well as actually genetically modifying the environment, which has been a proposal to potentially end global warming. These ideas indeed seem a little far-fetched as of present, but further exploration into genetic engineering doesn't have to begin there, or even include modification of the environment. I am in agreement that genetically modified organisms should not be released until the technology has come to a complete understanding. However, this shouldn't keep scientists from reaching that understanding. Further test trials can be conducted on a much smaller scale that can give insight into some of the larger effects it might have. In an interview entitled The New Ethical Gray of Animal Biotechnology, Sarah Hartley, who holds her PhD from the University of Toronto and who is currently involved in teaching and genomic science research, addresses safety and morality concerns associated with genetically modifying animals and the crops that they consume. Hartley acknowledges that animal suffering and the idea that you can own life in the lab turn a lot of people off from the idea of genetic engineering. For reasons like these, the SGR is vehemently against animal use. They would also be significantly opposed to the genetic modification of the crops that these animals eat, as it would be altering the natural environment. By controlling their own experiments, causing as little harm to living organisms as possible, and keeping modification out of agriculture, the SGR could fulfill their goals and at the same time still make scientific progress. Another example of how animals have significantly contributed to developments in this technology comes from Brian Handwerk. Fish Glow Green After Genetic Engineering is a magazine article explaining how genetically engineered fish are helping scientists observe the effects of different pollutants inside the body. The article informs readers what endocrine disruptors do in the body and how the glowing fish confirm previous findings. As demonstrated in the article, scientists were able to help reach a conclusion without physical disruption to the fish. By taking the necessary precautions, test trials can be less invasive yet still effective. While I completely understand the SGR's concern with safety and the responsible use of science, I believe there are ways that genetic engineering can coincide with those same guidelines. They aim for funding in the development and application of biological and medical knowledge to the benefit of all, which can be achieved through this technology. It would benefit researchers, scientists who are working on developing the technology, family of those who are diseased, the disease themselves, and those who are at risk for developing different illnesses. By educating those who don't understand genetic engineering, groups like the SGR can get the general population on board with current scientific advancements. Eliminating ethical and safety concerns would make the technology more universally appealing, and by giving the SGR the power to conduct their own less invasive labs, the element of control would be more prevalent. The highly educated individuals of this group, many of which hold a PhD in a science-related field, are more than qualified to make educated decisions regarding genetic engineering as long as they choose to implement it.